Good afternoon and welcome back to Evoke Ag. Now, while people make their way in, and we won't start to single them out unless they start to walk a little bit slowly. There we go, that's it. That's how we want to see the energy coming in. I'm genuinely so excited. I've seen these Groundbreakers rehearse over the last couple of days, and I think I just want to make it explicitly clear right now that we're not actually looking at just the next generation. This is generation now, because some of the concepts and the products that we're about to hear from over the next hour or so, genuinely mind-blowing, and they're things that are going to make impact on Australian farms and New Zealand farms from tomorrow going forwards. When it comes to innovation, it doesn't necessarily start in the topics that we've talked about today: capital, markets, finance, infrastructure. Innovation starts with someone noticing something and deciding that they're actually going to do something about it. The 350 million plastic pots that get thrown out every year in New Zealand, someone decided to do something about it. The needle that could be safer for both animals and people. The mastitis treatment that simply is just not good enough. The hours spent mustering cattle that, well, just could be smarter. And the disconnect between research and real farms. The Evoke Ag Groundbreakers are people who saw those challenges and decided that they'd come up with solutions. They're founders, researchers, designers, and operators. They're practical, they're restless, they are deeply connected to agriculture, and their solutions exist right now. This isn't some sort of next generation showcase, this is the generation shaping what's next. 5 Groundbreakers, 5 ideas in motion, 8 minutes each. But first, let me just give you a little tease of what we'll see.
Kia ora, my name is Elisa Harley, and I'm reducing plastic in the horticulture industry by creating biodegradable plant pots. In New Zealand, we use 350 million plastic plant pots. When you're planting 10,000 trees to go along a new highway, that's likely 10,000 plastic pots or plastic bags go to the landfill. In the next 5 to 10 years, I hope that planting trees really doesn't create any unnecessary waste.
Hi, my name is Tiarna Scerri. I'm trying to design and develop an antibiotic alternative to treat mastitis in dairy cows. I hope that something that I design is able to serve as an alternative to antibiotics. Antibiotics are becoming more and more redundant in terms of treatment of mastitis. My treatment would ideally be to have that alternative for antibiotics so that once those antibiotics become redundant, we have something that's ready to go straight away.
Hey, I'm Sam, founder and CEO of GrazeMate. GrazeMate's building robot flying cowboys. So we use off-the-shelf drones and build software that goes on them that allows them to autonomously muster cattle from one paddock to another. We've spoken to hundreds of farmers, and the prevailing thing is they've either been injured or know someone else who's been injured or seriously hurt mustering cattle. If we can be any small part of changing that, we will have done our job.
My name is Jade, and I am reducing disease spread during livestock vaccinating.
Livestock vaccinating is something that farmers do every single year. That tiny needle carries diseases that when injected into another animal can cause significant pain and suffering. Sterile needle is a holster for the livestock vaccination gun, and it's filled with our sterilising solution. So in between animals, the farmer can just put their vaccination gun into the holster and the needle will be sterilised, ready to use on the next animal.
My name's Jessie Armstrong. I want to grow people and invest in people. For me, a particular passion is working dogs and developing programs that increase our capacity to be responsible dog handlers and livestock managers. I spend a lot of time working with peers and colleagues to sort of pinpoint where there's opportunities for us to develop programs so that we have a future that everyone can find a career in agriculture that they belong in.
I just want to check that people are awake. Can we just start with maybe like a little bit of a golf clap? Because I think that's kind of what it was then. It was quite polite. And can we just build it a little bit? Because that's unreal. All right, now everyone's awake. Our first groundbreaker didn't set out to build a company. She set out to grow something. What she discovered on the way was a quiet contradiction hiding in plain sight. One that millions of growers face every single year, but they rarely question it. She questioned it, and instead of accepting it, she decided to rebuild a piece of the problem. Please welcome founder of Evo Pots, Elisa Harley.
Planting trees. It's great for the planet. So during the 2020 COVID lockdown, as a very determined 14-year-old, I built myself a greenhouse. I grew over 700 native plants and sold them to my local fair, garden store, and nursery. I felt proud. I was helping our planet. But then I saw something that I hadn't expected. Plastic plant pots. Hundreds of them all over my garden, and suddenly planting trees didn't feel so clean anymore. I spoke to other gardeners, same issue. Then I spoke to a farmer who'd planted 1,000 native trees to restore a wetland. He said, for every one tree we planted, one plastic plant pot went straight to the landfill. 1,000 trees, 1,000 pots, 1,000 pieces of waste. In New Zealand, nurseries and gardeners will use over 350 million plastic plant pots every single year. What's worse is 98% of them will never be reused. But why does planting trees have to create waste? I started digging deeper. I found that although plastic pots can be reused, biosecurity rules make it risky. Soil-borne diseases spread easily, so the problem wasn't farmers, it wasn't gardeners, it wasn't nurseries. It was the pot itself and the system around it. But what if we didn't have to reuse the pot because it simply returned to the earth? What if we could keep the good part, planting trees, and remove the waste completely? Sounds like a great idea to me. But does it already exist? I found that, it's too expensive. You'll never be able to make them in New Zealand. That's what they told me in my first meeting with industry professionals when they laughed at my idea. So we just keep creating plastic waste, or we import a solution in from the other side of the world? That didn't sound right to me. So, as the stubborn 16-year-old I was, I decided I was going to prove them wrong. I opened my kitchen cupboard, grabbed my family food processors, and started blending wood chips, old sheets of my homework, and self-raising flour. You can imagine the mess. But that mess took me on road trips during my school holidays to visit nurseries, forestry sites, sawmills, factories, and to more meetings with experts, all working together to map out a pipeline within New Zealand for a solution to be 100% Kiwi. This then turned into $40,000 from a grant and government partner, which unlocked a second prototype, which unlocked funding for a third, until we had our final prototype, Anivo Pots, a biodegradable plant pot made in New Zealand, made of 100% local primary industry residue. You don't remove the plant from the pot, you put the whole thing straight into the ground where it biodegrades in less than 12 months. As of today, we've tested over 600 different pots in different nurseries across all of New Zealand. The R&D process was so exciting. I was partnered with one of New Zealand's Crown Research Institutes. For 18 months, I worked with a team of scientists, trialing different forming systems, sizing agents, materials, and designs, until we'd finally perfected it. At 18 years old, I had 3 boxes full of 1-litre plant pots that were fully biodegradable, made in New Zealand, and made out of local primary industry residue. The trials were successful, the nurseries were happy, and I'd found a commercial manufacturer in New Zealand who had agreed to try and make this happen. And that's when I hit the roadblock. The roadblock everyone had told me they'd hit, and the roadblock they said I might likely hit. Turns out after fighting so hard to find a manufacturer in New Zealand, we still didn't have anyone to process our material at a price and scale that was commercially viable. That special formula we developed was going to cost 40 times what we had initially thought. My options were give up and let plastic pots remain industry standard, or make some short-term compromises. These are that my pots will be 2 centimeters shorter than I wanted, And they're going to be made out of recycled cardboard and paper waste. But for Enivopots to be made in New Zealand, these compromises were going to be worth it. And so finally, after 3 years of development, next month I'm going to Auckland to spend 2 weeks commencing the Enivopots pilot trial, where we're producing 20,000 units to be distributed. For the first time, Enivopots will be produced at scale. I mean, this is it. I saw a problem, created a solution. I have a business making a plant pot that's going to help our planet. The secret that got me here? People. The teachers who didn't laugh at me, the scientists who hopped on Zoom calls, the business leaders who replied to my LinkedIn messages, and an industry that treated me as someone who could contribute, not just someone that was too young. That's the power of intergenerational change makers. When generations work together. When a young person with ambition meets adults willing to mentor, support, and open doors. The doors that were unlocked for me have led me to be here today. Not only owning my own business, but personally being resilient and thriving through life as a 19-year-old girl. And just imagine if every young person who saw a friction point, a flaw, or a hidden piece of waste was taken seriously. Imagine the pace of innovation and the resilience that we could unlock. At its core, my journey comes back to something simple. Planting trees should not create waste. It's one tiny part of the agriculture industry, but it's one part that could be done better. Enivopots saw that problem, created a local solution, and now we're striving for global impact. So if what we do is relevant to your field of work, through manufacturing, piloting, distributing, investing, or just general interest, please come and find me. I'd love to speak with you. But if a biodegradable plant pot is not immediately relevant to you, I still encourage you. What is the plastic pot of your world? What's that one thing that's maybe being overlooked that could be done way better? The next generations deserve a world where we don't just have to accept things for how they are, but where we can hope for better. And I believe that this conference has the knowledge, networks, and the power to help build that world today, together. Enivopots is one small solution with a very big impact. Let's plant the future without planting the waste. Kia ora, thank you.
Well done, Elisa. I can't believe that. I just think, as you're talking, if we think by the time VOCAG's finished day one today, a million plastic pots in New Zealand have just gone to waste, into landfill. By the end of tomorrow, it's 2 million. By the time you probably get home, it's 3 or 4 million. We'd fill this room before we even know it. And that's just as you say, like in planting trees. So what is the plastic pot of our areas and our industry? It's a great question. Our next groundbreaker believes agriculture doesn't necessarily need better science. It needs better translation. Translation between farmers and policymakers, between labs and legislation, between innovation and responsibility. She's walked the line from agricultural high school to the Supreme Court, from dairy sheds to doctoral research, and she's here to challenge us to think not just about what we can invent, but how we choose to manage it. Please welcome Tiarna Scerri.
Hi, my name is Tiarna Scerri, and my mum has always said that I am best explained by my shoes. No, I'm not an aspiring Imelda Marcos or a shopaholic. My shoes just happen to tell the story of who I am and how I've come to stand here today. By all accounts, I was a curious little girl who loved reading and dancing. My ballet slippers, as you can see here, were my favourite pair of shoes in the whole wide world. And although I grew up on the outskirts of Sydney, in the historic Camden area, I did not grow up on a farm. It was Hurlston Agricultural High School that inspired me to put on a pair of farm boots. Preg testing heifers, growing our own crops, tractor driving, these ag lessons weren't just about the paddock to plate process. They were about the beauty of living on the land and living with the land. I also could, as you see here, also developed a special love for dairy cattle through showing my school's air shears. By the time I was finishing school, I knew two things. One, I loved ag, and perhaps that is the greatest power of agricultural education. And two, I was also strangely interested in law and policy. Yes, very nerdy, I know, but as I said, I do love reading. I was particularly interested in the challenge of regulating agricultural innovation, but specifically around biotechnology. How the law must balance the need for safety and fairness against the need to support industry and food security. I discovered a third thing, as drought was beginning to devastate much of New South Wales in 2017. There was a distinct language barrier between those standing in crinkly, dried-up paddocks and those in Parliament. I was struck by the disparity between what farmers were saying they needed and what government was doing to help. And I was devastated to see that real people were suffering the consequences. To me, the solution was simple. What we need is people who are bilingual, people who are dually literate in the needs of science and agriculture, law and policy, who can translate for each side. I knew I didn't want a similar language gap to open up around ag biotech, so I figured I had to become a translator. Armed with this guiding purpose, I embraced a long academic journey to achieve that dual literacy. I donned my appropriately leather lab shoes to major in genetics, focusing on livestock biotech and welfare. I studied law and was recently admitted to the Supreme Court of New South Wales wearing my court heels. And because life can't all be cows and case law, I added salsa dancing shoes to my repertoire as well. That doesn't need a clap. I am now a PhD candidate, working on the interdisciplinary issue of bovine mastitis and the antimicrobial resistance crisis. Mastitis is the inflammation of the mammary gland. It is painful, as many breastfeeding mothers already know, impacts milk production, and costs dairy farmers millions of dollars every year. For decades, the conventional treatment for mastitis has been antibiotics. But around the world, key mastitis-causing bacteria are becoming more and more resistant to these conventional treatments. We are heading towards a world where these treatments simply don't work. And then what? That's not just a farm business problem. That's an animal welfare problem, an industry problem, and not just for dairy. That's a food security problem. Furthermore, it's an example of our reactivity as an industry. Sometimes we only react once a crisis is here, even when the writing was literally on the wall. I stand here today in shoes that hopefully convey that I mean business. We need to be proactive, not reactive, in our management of agricultural challenges like antimicrobial resistance. Although this crisis is not yet a reality for Australian dairy, we should be working on the roadblocks now to avoid future losses. From a scientific perspective, this means looking for long-term rather than short-term solutions. I am developing an antibiotic alternative for mastitis treatment, that is designed to not just be a Band-Aid fix for 5 to 10 years, but a sustainable solution for 20, 30 years and beyond. Proactivity also means that extension starts at the beginning of a project. There is no point in me developing a mastitis treatment that farmers can't or won't use. From a policy perspective, proactivity also means pushing for regulatory frameworks that are more biotechnology conscious and therefore more future-proof. Because let's say that my designs work, and spoiler alert, they do. The problem is that although these mastitis treatments could help support the sustainability of the dairy industry, the regulatory frameworks in place are not equipped to harness this innovation properly. What seems like a small regulatory oversight can cause long-term detrimental impact to land, livestock, and livelihoods, which is what we're trying to avoid in the first place, right? It's ironic, really. The challenge of regulating agricultural innovation that I pondered in high school is now an active complication in my own work and the work of others. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? I believe that with great innovative power comes great regulatory responsibility. And that's a responsibility we all share. As a sector, we need to be striving for newer, better frameworks that more actively promote the safe, fair, and effective use of ag biotech. Biotechnological solutions are a crucial advantage in our race against an exponentially increasing global appetite and an ever-growing list of challenges to production. We can't let that advantage get away from us. We need to be prepared. Now, you see me on my soapbox, and you may be thinking, well, this is all well and good, Tiarna, but how exactly are we supposed to regulate for technology that doesn't exist yet? Well, I've done all this study to become a translator, so I'll give you 4 options. Number 1, we could ban all biotech that isn't specifically accounted for in legislation. This could work to prevent unintended consequences from new technology, but at the cost of discouraging innovation and potentially allowing other countries a market advantage, which farmers don't want. Alternatively, we could open slather it and regulate based on principles rather than specific thresholds and definitions. Sounds good in theory, but in practice, these principles are often too vague and too complex for farmers and scientists to understand. Maybe we could fix that. Another option is to have an initial trial phase for each new biotechnology and implement new rules as required, but the argument there is that we're always lagging just a few steps behind. Or we could do nothing. Leave this issue in the too hard basket and react once the crisis is here. Now, I am obviously open to all options bar the latter. To me, proactivity is possible, we just need to start. And we need translators in the room to make sure that we're all speaking the same language, the language of results. It has taken every pair of shoes to get me where I am today. And as I advocate for better regulation of biotech and try to develop an antibiotic alternative for mastitis, I will be taking my love for law, genetics, dairy cows, and even dancing with me. But it takes many different people from many different walks of life to make change happen, so that real people aren't caught in the consequences of a crisis we could always see coming. So my question is not what you would do in my shoes, but what can you do in yours? So that when biotechnology presents long-term, farmer-backed solutions to the world's pressing issues of greenhouse emissions, pest management, antimicrobial resistance, we are prepared.
Amazing, Tiarna. I can see the aha and light bulb moments that go off as you're talking, and a genuine skill, not only to translate those words, but I actually specifically had the word laboratory in my introduction. I said labs instead because that was too complicated for me. So, our next groundbreaker reminds us that innovation comes from every vantage point, and it doesn't always look flashy. Sometimes innovation looks like standing in a set of cattle yards and noticing something that everyone has just decided, well, we can live with it. She didn't start with venture capital and she didn't start with a lab. She started with a question. If we know this causes harm, why are we still doing it? What followed wasn't some big futuristic leap. It was something far more powerful. A small, practical fix to a problem that affects thousands of animals every year. Please welcome founder of Needle, Jade Luxton.
You can't innovate, is what I thought. Because I used to think innovation belonged to big companies, experts, and people who already knew what they were doing. But I was wrong. And I didn't think that I'd end up in agriculture. I'd moved away to study product design, convinced I'd stepped off the family farming track for good. But even when you leave physically, the problems don't leave your mind. And there was one problem that kept following me. Dirty livestock needles. Causing abscesses, spreading diseases, thousands of animals affected every year, millions of dollars lost. And yet, no one is talking about it. Not because farmers don't care, but because the system makes it hard to do the right thing. We know reused needles cause harm, we know sterilisation is required, and we know animal welfare matters. And yet, most needles aren't cleaned between animals. Not out of neglect, out of practicality. When you're vaccinating hundreds of animals, there isn't time to stop. There isn't a clean solution. So farmers adapt, they compromise, they accept the risk because they have to. And that bothered me. Because if this was human medicine, it wouldn't be acceptable. So why was it normal in agriculture? Why hasn't anybody fixed this? And that's when it hit me. Our small ideas matter. These small ideas start change. A simple tool can prevent real harm, and that's where SteriNeedle began. Ever since I was young, my parents always said I was very creative. If something didn't exist, I made it. If it was broken, I fixed it. So studying product design felt natural. But that's where I learned something that changed everything. You can innovate. Anyone can build something that matters. With the technology we have today, if you can think it, you can make it. So when I revisited the problem of dirty needles, it didn't feel impossible anymore. It felt like a design brief. And the design brief is to solve the painful abscesses, infections spreading through mobs, meat rejected, loss of income, biosecurity risks, because no one had a solution. I've spoken to over 100 farmers, and the reoccurring theme keeps coming up, that this is a problem, but there's just no solution. I remember talking to Lyndon, a deer farmer. He said, I am so sick of constantly changing needles. There has to be a better way. He even tried using a can of methylated spirits. Spoiler, it didn't really work. But he was right. There had to be a better way. Our animals should no longer have to suffer, and our farmers should no longer have to waste any more time on these necessary but painful tasks. But what if needles could be automatically sterilised every time they were holstered? That became the idea. Because innovation doesn't just belong to AI labs or big agri-tech teams. Innovation belongs to anyone who cares enough to fix the problems right in front of them. But even once we had a prototype, I still doubted myself. I was 17. One farmer needed it, but was it enough to become a business? Then came the field days. I took my 3D printed model into the innovation tent and I was blown away. Farmers crowded around, vets came over, everyone asked, how much is it? Where can I buy one? Even the Deputy Prime Minister walked across the tent to see what this Kiwi kid was up to. Those moments changed everything. SteriNeedle wasn't just my project anymore, it was an industry solution. Farmers told me SteriNeedle could save hours each day, cut vaccination time by 60%, and reduce infections dramatically. They showed me the impact before I believed it myself. And that's when I realised my work could shape their future. But SteriNeedle didn't start as a company. It started as a sketch, and then a prototype, and then another, and another, more than 100 iterations, because this tool, used thousands of times a day, had to be right. And now we have a design that can clip onto your belt or pocket, hold the vaccination gun to give you a third hand, and safely clean the needle with our SteriNeedle solution each time it is holstered. SteriNeedle saves up to 30 seconds per animal, reduces infection risks, and makes on-farm hygiene faster, simpler, and safer. Across a herd of 300, that's 2.5 hours saved. One deer farmer will use at least 300 needles a year, globally reaching 3 million needles disposed annually. SteriNeedle is able to reduce this number by 80%, as it allows livestock needles to be safely reused. And with fewer infections from cleaner practices, farmers are able to save $500 per animal with fewer vet call-outs. But as well as being safer for our animals, it's safer for our farmers, reducing the risk of needle stick injuries. Farmers in our trials have been so impressed, they've asked for more SteriNeedles for themselves and their mates. That's how you know something works, when behaviour starts changing on its own. But SteriNeedle is about more than efficiency. It's about respect. For the farmers who do the work and for the animals they care for. as agriculture is built on mutual respect. Healthier animals means healthier returns, and better welfare leads to better trust. This is the kind of farming future I believe in: practical, humane, and forward-thinking. But agriculture is changing fast, and the pressure on farmers is real. Welfare expectations, climate change, sustainability, and global competition. Waiting for someone else to fix things comes at a cost. Preventable infections, wasted time, loss of money, and ultimately, falling behind. But the good news is, we don't have to wait. Small fixes create big change, and Sterile is one example. But imagine what happens when hundreds of small ideas start rolling. So, to the farmers, what's one small problem you could solve today? Maybe it starts by joining our Sterile trial. To the vets, your insights shape how tools like this are used. Let's improve on-farm hygiene together. And to investors and supporters, if you want to scale something practical, proven, and needed, come find me. Because the mindset shift agriculture needs is simple. Not this is a problem, but how do we fix it? Real change doesn't start with the biggest invention. It starts with one person who fixes one small thing. Sterile was that for me, and now it's your turn. Let's build the future of agriculture together, one small practical idea at a time.
Well done, Jade. And any requests for Groundbreakers? I'm now their manager, because these guys are honestly, I just sit there just in awe. It's insane. Can I just get a sense check? We're halfway, well, over halfway, 3 of 5 through. How impressed are we, guys? In my opening, I emphasised that innovation isn't about what gets invented, it's about what gets used. And what gets used depends on the ecosystem around it. One core component of that is our people. And our next groundbreaker knows that all too well. She grew up on a sheep and cattle station in far western New South Wales, and she spent her career asking a deceptively simple question. What makes someone want to stay? Stay on the land, stay in our industry, and stay through drought, pressure, and change. She believes the future of agriculture won't be shaped by tools and tech, but by whether people feel like they truly belong. Please welcome Jessie Armstrong.
I'm the daughter of a second-generation farmer. I was born in the middle of the millennium drought and raised on our 24,000-hectare sheep and cattle station. If I was asked to close my eyes and picture a place where I feel a sense of belonging, I would imagine an endless plain of saltbush and bluebush rangelands just like this. Cobwebs glistening in the warm hues of a far western New South Wales sunset, as merinos bleat in the distance, a low hung haze of dust trailing them towards a windmill. For me, that flat, treeless countryside is where I belong. When we start talking about belonging, we are talking about a fundamental human need. A need we're feeling connected to and integral to our surrounding systems, like our friends, families, and workplaces, contributes to why we want to be somewhere. When I had the opportunity to deliver a co-design project investigating how we could support on-farm labour during drought, there was a lot we already knew. We need better accommodation. We need to navigate competitive wages and salaries. We need to provide fit-for-purpose training opportunities. We also need to foster more education options for young families, more meaningful employment opportunities for partners, and we need to shift the perception of old-fashioned stereotypes to showcase the true diversity of careers in our industry. What I didn't expect to hear was how often cultural factors, were identified as barriers to considering farm roles as viable, long-term career options. Factors like how work-life balance was managed and how expectations were set and communicated on farm, how training, feedback and conflict management was conducted within teams, how workplace values were shared and practiced, and how working with a team who wants to be at work and enjoys the work environment contributes to a culture that people want to be a part of. Culture influences our sense of belonging. Belonging, like innovation, isn't just something to feel good about. The hard truth is, poor culture is a silent liability on the balance sheet, and belonging will ultimately impact your bottom line. When I arrived at Evoke Ag last year, I came to the conference with a question. What are we actually doing at a national level to support the people who make agriculture possible? And why aren't we doing it better? To be frank, I was disappointed. I just wasn't satisfied by what I was hearing. In reality, in 2019 alone, we spent $1.9 million developing a workforce strategy. Almost 7 years later, that strategy rarely comes up in conversation. Dare I say it, I think it's underutilised. By day 2 of the conference, I felt deflated. I was desperate to experience some kind of epiphany until a Queensland producer shared this with me. There are plenty of programs to help our farm managers be better farmers, but almost none to help them become better managers and leaders. I realised in that moment, solutions to our workforce issues wouldn't come from strategies or roadmaps alone. They'd come from culture. And culture is shaped every day by how our managers and leaders show up. In our workplaces, on our farms, and in our sheds, culture determines whether people feel like they belong. And when people belong, they tend to stick around. The answer to my question wasn't in policy, strategy, accommodation, or salaries. The answer is in ensuring people have the same technical proficiency in managing and protecting human resources as we do our pastures and herds. Now that is something I can work on. AgriShift was born at Evoke Ag. This business is my version of a paddock trial. Ideas are sown, tried and tested with real people on real farms because these ideas have to hold up in the yards, in the dust, and when the pressure is on. This year, AgriShift is launching the Riverina Stock Dog Apprentices Pilot, a progressive working dog and livestock handling program in the Western Riverina, designed with a focus on peer learning and mentoring to increase the confidence and skills of young people working on farm. Next, we're co-designing cultural benchmarking, investigating how we can quantify, measure, and support on-farm businesses in improving workplace culture and practices. And next year, we're exploring Mustermates, a mentoring program aimed at supporting Hay Inc. Rural Education Program alumni beyond the traditional life cycle of the program. What ties all of these ideas together is the intention of keeping people front and centre. By building capability, shaping culture, and strengthening our community. But AgriShift is a small fish in a big pond, challenging and piloting new ways to overcome our workforce challenges can't sit with one business. It takes all of us to take responsibility. So, I invite you to join me in that shared responsibility. No matter your role, a farmer, a founder, researcher, policymaker, or student, I challenge you to start a conversation that inspires cultural change. One that treats culture with the same seriousness we treat productivity and profit. Because people don't just stay for the job. They stay because this is where they belong.
Nailed it, Jessie. Now, I'm just going to quickly ask our mic runners after this next one. We've got about 10 minutes for questions, so get ready to run after this next presentation. Our final groundbreaker grew up mustering cattle in North Queensland, immersed in the life of grazing cattle up in the north. But then life interrupted the plan. What followed wasn't just a recovery, it was a re-evaluation of time, leverage, and what technology could actually do. He's now building autonomous systems that move cattle globally, and more importantly, return time to the people that run these farms. Please welcome Sam Rogers.
I grew up on a cattle station in North Queensland, and naively, I thought my childhood would be much the same as most kids. Baby Sam up there didn't know how good he had it. But there was one thing. Back on the station, work and life would blend into one. I remember most days starting with Dad's headlights rolling out of the shed, and the day wouldn't end till long after dark when they'd eventually sail home. Even the Christmas just gone, we sat around at Christmas dinner staring at the bomb, making side bets on which fences would be washed away and how on earth we were going to move the heifers away from the creek as it was rising with the storms. I also remember being visibly shocked figuring out that a corporate full-time job was 38 hours a week. The idea of being able to clock on and clock off was totally foreign. Back on the station, work was 12 hours a day, it was 7 days a week, and it was 365 days a year. But that's not to complain. We chose that lifestyle. It's the lifestyle we wanted, and it's the price that we were willing to pay for the privilege to help feed the world. What I never really considered was how thin the margin for error could be in a business like that. I assumed that we could and would always be able to run our operation the same way we always did, from when I grew up to when I grew old. That all changed in April 2023. Over a 6-month period, a tumor grew in my spine. My spine collapsed. 2 of my vertebrae had a great big hole in them. I broke my back in 3 places. I couldn't walk. There were shards of bone going up and down my back. And that affected my family just as much as it affected me. Mum and Dad basically put their lives on hold. They left the station to support me in hospital in my senior year of high school. Up till then, time had been this abstract commodity. At the very least, it was abundant. I should also note that at that point in my life, I had this 80-year plan of where I should be up to at every year. Much like my spine, that plan quickly compressed. And at 16, time became my most limited and desperate commodity. Of course, I've spoiled the end of this story by standing here today. I was lucky, and I recovered. But I also figured out that recovery isn't the same as reversal. I got my time back, but in that same breath of relief, I was faced with the harsh reality that my family didn't. After those 6 months, they weren't 6 months that Dad could get back or catch up on the property. He'd gone from working on his business to working for the station. And from the outside, that was a small shift. You couldn't visibly tell what had changed, but to us, there was something material about it. In our heads, that meant everything. We'd just figured out how important time was and how critically we needed to defend it. Of course, as life does, it kept moving and time went on. Eventually, I went off to the University of Sydney to study robotics. And I sat between these two worlds. I saw how technology was able to compress hours of work into minutes. But I also saw how none of that followed me back home. Seeing both sides of the coin here made me feel, frankly, really guilty. I'd been living between both worlds, and I quickly found out that the story I told earlier wasn't in any way unique to my family, my dad, or our operation. That was basically the story of everyone. I properly realized that in July 2025 and promptly dropped out of university to start building a better grazing solution for families like mine. That really quickly became GrazeMate. We're building autonomous drones to help farmers and ranchers move and monitor their cattle with no pilot. We teamed up with, of course, our incredible internal team in the audience here today, but also everyone from animal psychologists to low-stress stock handlers to teach a drone what a cow's thinking, to teach it how an animal's going to respond to a drone buzzing in the air behind it, and how we use that to guide cattle from one paddock to another. GrazeMate lets farmers move their cattle more often. We let them do it more consistently for less money and less time. We track everything down to the head angle of a cow and how fast it's moving through a paddock to build out an idea of how quickly it's going to respond and to not only move cattle efficiently, but to do it while they're calm and in a headspace that works for the cow, for the grass, for the paddock, and for the people running the operation. Beyond letting you rotationally graze more, we're now working on models that let graziers weigh their cattle from the air and tell you how much grass is in a paddock, all from one drone. Of course, none of this has been linear. From the nuances and variance between heifers in Charters Towers to breeders in the Riverina and the whole different beast that I've recently discovered of the Texas Longhorn and Texas Cowboy, our biggest barrier to entry hasn't been technical or operational, despite how many risks there were. It, interestingly, came out to be regulatory, and fairly so. To make something like GrazeMate work and at scale, we need to work 24/7 and 100% of the time, both for farmers and ranchers and also the people regulating our skies. To do that, I've shifted to San Francisco. I did that not because Australia lacks the talent or the research or the problem. We've got world-class agriculture with world-class researchers and world-class problems worth solving. Unfortunately, the fastest way to realize a solution like GrazeMate for Australian cattlemen like my dad was to validate that in an international market, in this case, the US. That decision sucked to make. I wanted to build a solution that could help us at home. But in the process, we've been humbled to know the scale of the problem we're solving, from everything from water buffalo in Namibia to cattle across Australia, Brazil. We got an email from someone in Yemen yesterday. From the four corners of the world, we are building a solution to help people like my dad. Over the last 6 months, we've started working with more than 500,000 cattle. We've got just shy of 2 million on a wait list now. A rancher in Brazil told us that they've always known how they wanted to run their cattle, but they've never had the time or the money to do it justice. They said that with GrazeMate, they're going to be able to get closer to that goal. A farmer in Queensland told us that with what we've built, they finally have the safety net to take their first international holiday in 6 years, because we can give them oversight over their property that they couldn't have had before. This all started by trying to build a solution for me and my family back home. Now we've entered partnerships with ranchers, farmers, and graziers across 6 continents, all of whom are hoping to gain more leverage over their time and farm, ranch, or graze the way they've always wanted. What surprised us most hasn't been the problem or the variance and nuances between these different properties. It's been how consistent the problem is, how universal the desire to do more with your time and more with your money has been. We found that the problem was never the work, it was that the cost of time was invisible. My family found that out the hard way, and GrazeMate is doing everything we can to change that. We're trying to give farmers back control over their time, their money, and their resources, and their properties. We're building a world where decisions can be made from your phone and they can be deployed in seconds without changing who farmers are or how they run their operations. For everyone who's been on this journey for a decade or more, we're so grateful to be building that future with you. A world where agriculture gets technology first and not last, and where the people doing the most essential job in our world aren't asked to give up more of their lives than anyone else to do it. Thank you.
Five incredible groundbreakers, and I'll ask the others to come up. We've got a couple of mic runners. We've only got about 6 minutes, so I'll ask each of you to keep your answers short if we can, but can I see a show of hands? It's kind of like an auction here because there will not be enough time. Any hands? There we go, one down the front. I do feel like an auctioneer. I get to live my dream.
You didn't really have what your ask was. Like, what are you wanting? What do you need? None of you sort of said what you need. You're needing money, you need contacts, what are you needing next?
Start with you, Sam.
GrazeMate, maybe?
We'll go across.
Sort of a ton of things on the cards. I just came across from the US and we're onboarding as many ranchers as we can right now. We've been fortunate to be supported by capital at this stage, but what we're really looking for is how to bring this back to Australia. So to talk policy, to talk regulations, and to figure out sort of the way in which we can prove the solution that we're building and gain approval to solve these problems for people back home.
Thank you, Sam. Elisa.
For Anivo pots, so I mentioned that next month we're making our first 20,000 pots, but we've had to compromise on our formulation because New Zealand didn't have the commercial infrastructure to make our special formula work. And so being in an international market, I am open to see if there is infrastructure in somewhere like Australia or beyond where we can process primary industry residue, say like sawdust from a sawmill, and get that into a pulp so that we can use that residue to make our product.
For me, it's just, I think we talk our way around culture, and I think it's time for us to start taking a bit more accountability over the culture that we create in our workplaces. And And if we can start doing that and treating it with the same seriousness as productivity and profit, then I'm going to know that I've started doing my job right.
I've probably got two things. So in terms of the mastitis treatment research that I'm working on, at this point, I'm earlier than any of these people, I need funding. So the mastitis treatment work is definitely something that I'm wanting to sort of talk to people about investment and how to grow that further. But in terms of my main soapbox, the regulatory frameworks, definitely being able to talk to people within all the different regulatory frameworks that are relevant to biotechnology is an awesome start. So gene technology regulator, APVMA, TGA, those types of people would be awesome. For the mastitis treatment, that's just to keep working in the lab.
No, how much were you looking for?
A big number, I've been told. Look, at the moment it's small scale, so I'm very happy to disclose that it's realistic at this moment. So 20, 30 grand is a good starting point to get me to that next stage. And then from there, if we get positive results, it then becomes a case of growth from there, patent work, and that stuff obviously takes more significant investment. Yeah, thanks.
And for me, for sterile needle, I'm mainly looking for connections, whether that's in animal health or any kind of farming connections. Also, I'm currently looking into manufacturing to start producing at scale. So any kind of manufacturing or distributing connections would be great.
Great, thank you. So in a nutshell, I was going to say, Zoetis or Gallagher maybe at this end, if anyone has connections here. R&D or money. There was a bit on the on the stage just before. Here maybe HR, head of people and culture. Point Jessie in the right direction. Sawdust, wood chips, trees, and regulators. Okay, Julie Collins. There'll be a few people in her here. We'll come back after. I'm just going to keep moving because we've got questions. Did I see a question? There we go. We've got time for one more after this too, depending.
My question's for Elisa. Elisa? How long is the shelf life? If they're biodegradable, and I can just imagine these plants at Bunnings being watered to keep them alive, how long does it take till they degrade?
So in a commercial nursery in a Nevo pots with a plant in it, will last 6 months at minimum. So that's being watered like 30 minutes a day, every day for 6 months. They've worked really well in our trials, and then they will biodegrade in the ground in under 12 months.
Wow. Okay, one more question, otherwise I'll ask mine. Okay, no takers. I'm going to ask each of you, just in terms of the mindset, I want to know, give us a glimpse into, you guys have approached your different projects, products, businesses with just such tenacity and grit. And I want to know, like, can we just get behind the curtain of each of you? What's driving you and why are you just so driven down these pathways? Because it's genuinely inspiring. Jade, I'll throw to you first.
Two things for me. One is I am hugely passionate about animals and I want to really make a big impact on something that I do impacting animals in a positive way. And then the second thing, I want to be able to prove everyone that they can build anything they want. Yeah.
I would say for me, dairy, cattle, and the dairy industry is definitely a passion from my experiences in high school, and I definitely want to give back and contribute to that industry and community. Specifically for me, that's my personal motivation, but also just in terms of being able to see these discrepancies between, science, ag, law and policy, drives me nuts, because all it takes is a couple of people in the right spot to say the right things to the right people, and we could solve these bigger sort of regulatory issues that seem to make a lot of us bang our heads against the wall. Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Jessie.
For me, it's constantly hearing that if it's not broken, don't fix it, and the other half of that is this old mindset of it's how it's always been and it's how we've always done it, and there's nothing wrong with how we've done it. That's fine, but there's no, we don't grow from that, and there's a lot that we can benefit from just having a crack and just challenging and going and just doing something a little bit different. It doesn't mean reinventing the wheel, but it does just mean having a look at it from a different perspective.
Elisa.
Well, living in New Zealand, pretty beautiful place, and also being able to have the privilege to travel overseas and seeing how other countries look in comparison to being in the native bush in New Zealand made me realise that I'm so privileged to be where I am and to have New Zealand in the state that it is, and I want to make sure that the future generations can also appreciate its beauty, and so just working around ways where we can make those small little changes in hopes to protect the environment for the future.
Sam.
I think there was a level of frustration. Like, I'd been seeing this sort of problem day in, day out. It affected our family so deeply, and then sort of seeing firsthand how dangerous it could be and the just impact that overall could have. And I felt some strong level of responsibility knowing that I was in a position between technology and agriculture that there should be a better way. It kind of just fundamentally makes sense that what we're working on should exist, and I think we need to give it a red hot crack to make that happen for farmers across the world.
Well, I'm going to ask you to hold for 2 seconds, but firstly, can we just give our Groundbreakers a huge round of applause? And I just want to say, I guess, with the opportunity to see behind the curtain of Evoke Ag, each of these young people have gone through more than 3 months of training. They threw the hat in the ring. We've got people, obviously, from New Zealand this year, which is huge to see the ecosystem growing. And that kind of investment doesn't just happen by chance. It's deliberate by AgriFutures. It's the work through Haywire. It's the work through the Horizon scholarships. And it's the investment in each of you, because the impact that you're going to make on our sector already is extraordinary. And with the right people around you, is going to be unstoppable. So that's on all of us. And I think I just want to say thank you to Holly, to Bryce and Malka. The work and the training and the development you put into these young people is just extraordinary. So a huge round of applause for all of them. And then a final one, I think, because we're looking at the future now. And this is so exciting for our sector. So thank you to each of you. Thank you for what you shared. And please don't let them get out of the room without being stopped. Thank you.